Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Jeff Mendelson, and this is the One Big Tip podcast. And today I am really pleased to have with me on the line Jared Loftus. Jared is a serial entrepreneur since the fifth grade. Jared was named college football's biggest entrepreneur by Forbes in 2021 and went on to co create one of the fastest growing ACT prep companies in the country. Today, Jared sits as the chief operating officer at Rasa.io, where his mission is to help companies increase their customer engagement through personalized email newsletters. So join us today as Jared walks us through how to stay in touch with your audience in a relevant, non-salesy way by using evergreen content and a personal touch to keep them loyal. It's going to be a lot of fun today. Jared, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to the show.
Absolutely, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
So I'm really curious about this background that you have. So you played sports in school, right? It got you, it obviously gave you a great foundation to go into, to go into the business field. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you are so amazing.
Yeah, so I've always been an entrepreneur, just whatever the ideas were cranking at the time. That first business out of college was selling basically LSU t-shirts in a brick and mortar store. And that came from me selling t-shirts in college, where people were starting to hit me up on, these t-shirts I would create before games. And once I thought like people want this could be a business, went after that. And then from there, I've just done a bunch of different things. I've probably started too many businesses. I like to remind people that serial entrepreneur is not always the greatest thing. It just means I can fill out the LLC paperwork pretty efficiently and get a business up and going. But I've enjoyed it. It's all I've really known. And business, like, to me, business is my art. Like I enjoy business. I enjoy growing the businesses, and it's fun to me.
You know what's really interesting about, like going through your LinkedIn profile and seeing the progression of the different types of businesses that you've been involved with, they fill a need, right? They definitely filled a need, especially from, like the college t-shirts during games, ACT prep. Everybody needs ACT prep, right? And then, you get into this really interesting space, which is personalizing email newsletters. Now, like as a digital marketer, I can tell you that producing one newsletter for one client, or even for myself, is a pain. Doing it for multiple clients, different voices, getting the content together, sourcing it, it's a lot. So how did you guys come up with the idea to build Rasa, and how did that snowball? How did that all take effect?
Yeah, definitely. So, from basically, like, I've done e-commerce, went into food trucks, and then the business of education, and now email. It's like, well, what's the common denominator there? Like, outside looking in, people don't really see it. And as you mentioned, it's kind of just like where needs could be met. And with Rasa, previous to Rasa, everything I've done has always used email in some form or fashion from a marketing or branding standpoint. And so with this idea, the idea was around, well, what is it that we can do to make it easier for people to stay in touch with their customers on a regular basis, but not in a salesy way, right? And so as you mentioned, sometimes putting together a newsletter is difficult. It takes time. You have to think about it. And especially with small business owners, like they may not have that time because they're wearing a bunch of different hats. And so doing something on a regular basis was kind of more of a chore. And not to mention what we're proposing is something that kind of keeps you engaged and establishing and keeping that relationship with your customer. It's not necessarily a call to action. It's not necessarily this direct ROI that you can point to and go, I sent out this email and we made this much money, right? Because what we're proposing is, hey, put something out there that's relevant, put something out there that's interesting. And in doing that, you're going to form that relationship with the person so that when it does come time to do business with them, they haven't forgotten about you. They haven't, like, you haven't gone silent on them, right? It's not like they haven't heard from you in 6 months. Like, you have something that's kept them engaged. and we're helping to make that possible.
You know, it's interesting. I had this exact conversation this week, right? Where my client's calling me up and basically just the start of the conversation was, your newsletters suck. They're not bringing in business. Like, why are we doing this? And you know, like, first of all, I never really answer those emails like very quickly. I always take a step back.
Yeah, you got to take a breath.
She's not personally attacking me, right? You know, she does have a legitimate concern, but at the same time, you know, she's missing a key point. And I think you really hit it, was that you can't necessarily draw a direct line between sending out email A leads to sale A. Right. And, you know, maybe if the way your CRM is set up that you can do that direct attribution, but at the same time, you know, there are many different attributions that you have going on. You know, you have your retargeting, you have your, you know, the different communications that you put out. Email is very powerful, but it really is, I don't know, you know, 30 to 50% of that attribution pie. There are others out there as well. Right. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, the personalization process. I'm really curious to hear about, you know, let's just take like term life insurance, right? If you're trying to take, yeah, I know I'm going to throw a hard
threw me a curveball with that one. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's like, all right. So, you know, that's why we're on this call, right?
Let's go.
So you know, like, first of all, it's not a very sexy industry. Right. And it's something that you really need to be creative if you're going to write content for. Now, thankfully, you know, like, you can write content. There is enough ancillary content out there in the world that you really can source timely content that's non-competitive in just about any field to support your thesis, right? Whether, you know, like, you know, like, whether before or after COVID is the right time to buy term life insurance, for example. Right. There are thousands of articles written about that already. How do you help people figure out the personalization process and to actually get that message into those email newsletters in order to help them drive more sales? Walk me through a little bit about the rationale on how that works.
So I would back it up a little bit and say, you know, a lot of times people want to go specifically into their product and talk about either themselves or exactly what they do. And so something like term life insurance, as you put it, not the sexiest of topics, but something that plenty of people are considering and thinking about. What I would do is say, okay, one, think about what other content is out there that would be interesting and relevant to the same group of people that are considering term life insurance, even though the content may not be exactly about that. Right. So if you're thinking about term life insurance, you're thinking about the future, you're thinking about risk and that kind of stuff, but you're also basically saying, like, you want to take care of some other people that may be left behind. Right. Which is also, you probably want to get the most out of life and like how to enjoy life and things like that. And so there's all this other content about, you know, that you could probably find of living in the now and how not to take now for granted and being present and all of this other content that would still be relevant to that group of people, and then make it about that, where it's something that's interesting, right? You can only send so many emails about term life insurance before somebody's like, oh, well, this is just another email about term life insurance. Click, they either delete it, they never open it, whatever, right? And so what we're suggesting is, if you can establish that relationship with them by being seen as interesting or helpful or relevant to them, a lot of marketers are like, well, why would I ever want to send them to content on another site or go somewhere else? So two things. One, well, they're probably reading other content anyway. Why don't you be the person that is the one that sent it to them? So now you get the benefit of having been helpful to them. But two, with at least in using the Rasa platform, now you get to know that that's something they were interested in, right? Because that activity is being recorded. And so how much more of a benefit is that to you? Like, if you start showing that, or if you start seeing that like a certain type of content is what's resonating with people, maybe that is something you decide to write your own blog piece about on your own website, right? And so I think there's plenty of benefits to be had around not talking specifically about your product, because now you're pulling them in. It's the same age-old adage of like when you go to if you go to like a networking event or a cocktail party, like if you want to be interesting, be interested, right? Like listen, talk about other things. If you go into a party and just talk about yourself all the time, people are eventually going to kind of walk away, right? It's the same with your email. So this is something that allows you to still be interesting to the recipient because it's about them and what's interesting to them, as opposed to it being all about you, the sender.
So when you set someone up on a platform that helps them curate that third party content, what do you see as the net result of of going through that activity, right? Because first of all, you're starting out, and like you have your primary content, maybe the cornerstone blog post content that you created, and then you're adding like 2 or 3 related or related pieces of content that all go into this newsletter and eventually get sent out.
Yep.
How have you seen content being improved by going through that process, as opposed to just sending out using your own software like Aweber or ActiveCampaign in order to do that?
Yeah. So let's take your emails, for example, right? Like you have things that you want to send out to people. You've got your podcast episodes and then maybe something that you've written. But it's not just about you, because you have people that are paying attention to you that are interested in growing their business or specifically in marketing. And you probably read a lot of content that people would find interesting, but not everyone may find all of the content you read interesting. And so if you could take those, let's call it 25 articles you read over the course of the week, put it into this repository of content, let's say inside the platform at Rasa. And then from there, the AI is going to choose which of those articles go to which people. Now you started with you as the original curator, and then the AI started to dial it in on, well, these articles would be interesting for, Mary. These articles would be interesting for John, and it starts to divvy that out. And then what you see is typically what our customers tell us is higher open rates and click rates, because now you're sending something to people that they want to open because it's interesting to them. You've shown that what you're sending them is and so they want to open that. And so it's different than, hey, here's an email that's all about me and my business. Now you flip the script and said, hey, here's this email that's about something you find interesting, and it's about the sender.
When your platform takes that information, processes it, and puts it all together, what's going on in the background? Like what kind of logic is being applied here in order to figure out what is relevant and what isn't?
So that's where the artificial intelligence comes in, and we're using multiple forms of it, really around like natural language processing and things like that, where basically the content that comes in that is able to be chosen by the AI for each recommended email is the article's being read. Okay, so the AI reads the article, associates with it topics, keywords, concepts, and then as individuals read that content, then those topics and keywords and concepts get associated with that person, so that in the future, if anything else is around that area of interest, then it'll be more likely to be recommended to that person. So the AI is not only making the recommendations of which content goes to which person, it's also reading the content so that it's able to do that.
What would you say are the most successful industries or types of clients that utilize this?
It's really about the sender and the mindset. Is it more so than the industry? I think specifically people that have a longer sales cycle or a longer period in between sales, it's really helpful because let's say you're not in a business that can sell somebody something every week or every month, right? But you don't want them to forget about you in between those times. Maybe you're an infrequent vendor to this person. And so you need something that's gonna not only be sent to them, but they'll actually find interesting enough to open and read, right? And so if you can look at it from a standpoint of here's something that keeps me maybe not front of mind, but at least on their radar, so that when the time comes for them to need your product or service again, they're not like, wait, who was that did that thing? Or what they've been hearing from you regularly, right? And so it's more about that than it is specific industries, just because it is a change of mindset. Most people that think about email marketing are thinking, well, what did we get from that? What was the dollars associated with that email? And so if you kind of zoom out and take a little bit longer term look at that, then I think that's where you can have a more sustainable and long-term way of going about those relationships with your customer.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Can you let everyone know how they can learn more about your company and how they can reach out to you directly?
Yeah, check out rasa.io. It's a great place to learn more about what we're doing, but you're also able to sign up for a free account and get started using it, play around with it, see if it makes sense and works for you. So, and then me personally, you can reach out on all the socials at just Jared Loftus, and happy to discuss more.
Amazing stuff. Thank you for taking the time, first of all, to share this with us, to speak with the audience. I really appreciate it. I find this type of software and the thought process behind it intensely interesting. And really what happens is that it really helps us all become better marketers, no matter which industry we're in. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. Thank